I'm not proud of how quiet I was that morning. The truth is, when a man feels the ground disappear under him, he doesn't scream. He freezes. And that's exactly what I did while my CEO stood in front of 50 people and told them I'd compromised the integrity of the project. The worst part? I knew he was lying before he even opened his mouth. I remember the room too well. Fluorescent lights, stale coffee, the static hum of the AC. I was standing near the long glass conference table when he walked in with that calm, practiced arrogance he wore like a tailored suit. He didn't look at me, not once. He went straight to the head of the room, smoothed out his tie, cleared his throat, and announced that the company needed to make an example of poor leadership decisions. Leadership, that was me. Or so he decided. People turned, some confused, some curious, a few already pitying me. I didn't know what was coming, not exactly, but something in my stomach tightened, and then he said my name. Just my name. Clean. Sharp, like he was slicing it off me. He laid out a story I didn't recognize, that I had missed a key compliance deadline, that I'd ignored protocol, that my oversight jeopardized the biggest client we'd ever had. Everything he said was technically possible, believable even, except for one detail. I wasn't the one responsible for that file. He was. He'd signed the wrong approval, delayed the handoff by 3 days, and then buried the email thread when he realized the consequences. And now, to save his own image, he needed a body on the table. Mine was convenient. My hands felt heavy. My tongue felt glued to the roof of my mouth. People stared, waiting for me to defend myself. But the more he spoke, the more I realized something. He wasn't asking for the truth. He was narrating a scene he'd rehearsed. I was just the final prop he needed to complete it. He ended the performance with a polished sigh, folded his hands, and said the phrase that split my life cleanly into before and after. Effective immediately, we will be terminating Grant's employment. We appreciate his service. It was the way he said service, like I'd been a disposable intern, not the guy who'd fixed his messes for 4 straight years. No one moved, not until he gestured toward the door with a subtle tilt of his chin, as if I were interrupting his meeting by still existing inside it. I picked up my bag, nodded at the few co-workers who couldn't look away fast enough, and walked out with the strange awareness that every step I took was echoing too loudly. Outside, the sun was too bright, hyper-real, like the world should look different when everything inside you collapses. I sat on the curb next to my car longer than I should have. I didn't cry. I didn't even swear. I just breathed, slow and mechanical, trying to understand how someone could erase 4 years of work in 4 minutes. I went home early, told my girlfriend I wasn't feeling well, and locked myself in the spare room under the excuse of needing quiet. But I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, replaying every moment, every sentence, trying to figure out why I hadn't said anything, why I hadn't stood up, pointed at him, and told the room the truth, why I hadn't fought. But the more I thought about it, the more something unsettled me. He looked almost confident delivering that speech, like he already knew nothing would blow back on him, like the situation was contained. Except it wasn't. I found out the next morning before I even finished my coffee. My phone lit up with messages from people I barely talk to anymore. Analysts, managers, even a board assistant, all saying the same thing. Something's wrong. The deal is collapsing. They can't access the system. They can't find the data. Legal is panicking. I scrolled, confused, until one message made my chest tighten. You were the only one with the full workflow. He didn't think of that. I stared at the screen, the room silent except for the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. The CEO had fired the only person who understood the $500 million contract he'd been bragging about for months. The only person who knew how to stabilize the architecture, how to present the compliance reports, how to negotiate the final technical audit. He'd cut off his own oxygen supply, and for the first time since leaving the building yesterday, I felt something other than humiliation. Control. The messages kept coming, then the calls. At first from co-workers, then from management, then from his assistant. And finally, at 9:14 a.m., the name I least expected appeared on my screen. The CEO, calling me. I didn't answer, not because I wanted to torture him, but because I wanted a moment to absorb the shift, the sudden tilt of the entire situation. Yesterday, he dismissed me like a problem. Today, I was the only solution he had left. I put my phone face down on the counter, inhaled slowly, and realized something that made the humiliation of the previous day settle into something new, something sharper, something almost calm. This wasn't the end of the story. This was the beginning. I let the phone ring until it stopped. It buzzed again almost immediately, then again, like whoever was behind it thought persistence could rewrite yesterday. I watched my own reflection in the black screen of the microwave instead. Same face, same tired eyes, but something behind them had shifted. Yesterday, I was the guy being escorted out of the building. Today, I was the guy not picking up. On the fourth call, my voicemail finally pinged. I poured more coffee before listening. Grant, it's Daniel. First name, suddenly. Yesterday, I was Mr. Wells when he was publicly firing me. There seems to be a situation with the Northbridge account. We need to clarify some details around the implementation. Call me back as soon as you can. Clarify some details. That was one way to describe a $500 million deal circling the drain. Northbridge wasn't just any client. They were the client. A 500 months, multi-year, all-eyes-on-us contract. The kind that made headlines, that got investors on calls, that built careers, or wrecked them. I knew every inch of that implementation. I knew where the bodies were buried and where the bandages were hidden. I'd spent months building the compliance workflow, mapping every document, every approval chain, every automated handoff to their internal systems. And because I don't trust people who treat deadlines like suggestions, I kept an offline map, my map, on a drive that no one else knew about. Another voicemail, then another, one from his assistant, voice tight and too polite. Grant, hey, the Northbridge team is asking for some very specific artifacts from the compliance environment, and we can't seem to, locate the final versions. Can you please call back? This is time sensitive. Time sensitive. Yesterday, walking me out of the building in front of everyone apparently wasn't. By 10 a.m., my irritation had burned away the numbness. It wasn't just that he'd fired me. It was how. No warning, no private conversation, no attempt at truth. Just a public execution to protect his own image. Now he wanted my help, but not enough to admit it had all been bullshit. My phone rang again, same name on the screen. This time I answered. Grant, he said, sounding almost relieved. Thank you for picking up. Daniel, I replied, letting his name sit there, equal weight. You're calling my personal phone. I don't work for you. He exhaled hard, like he didn't have time for my attitude. That made me smile a little, which annoyed me even more. We can discuss what happened yesterday later, he said. Right now, we have an issue with the Northbridge audit. They've escalated to their board. They're asking for the full compliance evidence package and the system lineage diagrams. The team is struggling to reconstruct what you oversaw. I almost laughed, not at the situation, at the word choice. Struggling to reconstruct what you oversaw, not what you built, not what you designed. Just something vague enough to pretend I hadn't been the foundation of the whole thing. You mean the evidence library and the live traceability model, I said. The one I asked for additional storage for. 3 times. Silence. Papers shuffled on his end. Yes. That? Let me guess, I added. Someone archived the wrong environment to save costs. And Northbridge wants proof that nothing was altered after the sign-off date. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. We're facing a significant exposure if we can't provide this documentation, he finally said. I'm willing to bring you back in as a consultant. No, I cut in. It felt good. Small, sharp, clean, like slamming a door just enough to hear the frame shudder. No, he repeated like he'd misheard me. You fired me for compromising the integrity of the project, remember? I said. Help me understand why the guy you blamed is suddenly the only one you're calling. That's not a fair characterization of what happened, he said quickly. The decision yesterday was about optics. Optics, I repeated. Right, not truth, not responsibility. Optics. My jaw clenched. I'd replayed that word 100 times in my head over the last 24 hours. Integrity. He'd weaponized it against me. Now I was listening to his voice shake over a word that actually described him. Grant, he said, voice dropping. Northbridge has paused the final signature. They're threatening to walk. If they do, that's $500 million in long-term revenue gone, and the board will hold me accountable. We both know you don't want to see the company implode over a misunderstanding. There it was. The hook. We both know. We both know you're still loyal. We both know you still care. We both know you're the kind of man who will jump back into the fire that burned you, just to prove you're not bitter. He was counting on that, counting on the same quiet that kept me from yelling yesterday. He didn't know that quiet had changed. What's the actual problem? I asked, keeping my voice flat. Not the PR version. He hesitated, then gave up the pretense. We can't reconstruct the compliance evidence in time for their board review. You were the only one who understood the cross-system mappings. Legal is sitting in my office. The CFO's already been on one call with Northbridge's audit committee and left it, unhappy. And you want me to fix it, I said. Yes, he admitted. Quickly. He expected me to jump at the chance, to prove my value, to show them all they'd made a mistake. Maybe a month ago I would have. Maybe I would have rushed back, grateful just to be needed, ignoring the humiliation as long as I could still be the hero. But something about hearing him say, the board will hold me accountable, changed the temperature in the room. I'll think about it, I said. You don't have time to think, he snapped, a crack in the polished tone. We need to respond to Northbridge by this afternoon. Then you don't have time to play games, I answered. Email me the exact list of what Northbridge is asking for. The original SOW, the updated audit scope, and the last 3 status decks you showed them. From your account, not some intern summary. Then maybe we can talk. He didn't like that. I could hear it in the way his breath shortened. For the first time in 4 years, I was giving him homework. We're on the same side here, Grant, he tried. You're angry, I get it, but... You don't, I said. If you did, yesterday would have looked different. Send the documents, or don't. But stop calling me like I still work for you. I hung up. It wasn't a big theatrical moment. No dramatic music, no cheering co-workers. Just me, standing in my kitchen in yesterday's hoodie, heart pounding like I'd just done something far bigger than end a phone call. A few minutes later, my email pinged. Then again. Then again. He'd sent everything I'd asked for, plus a long message full of phrases like mutually beneficial, temporary engagement, and restoring trust. I scrolled past all the corporate perfume and opened the attachments. Within 10 minutes, I saw the whole mess. They'd promised Northbridge a level of traceability that only existed in my offline map and the routines I'd manually kept alive. The system snapshot they'd archived was incomplete. If Northbridge dug too deep, and they were already digging, they'd see gaps. Gaps that looked like manipulation, even if they weren't. Gaps worth lawsuits. He hadn't just fired me. He'd fired his only alibi. For a second, anger flared so hot, I had to set the laptop down. Not at the company. At him. At the way he'd stood in that conference room. Eyes dry, voice measured, willing to pin this exact nightmare on me if it kept his hands clean. He'd known that if something went wrong, I wouldn't be there to defend myself. That was the whole point. Except now he needed the man he tried to bury. I opened a blank document and started typing notes. Not for him. for myself. I mapped out what could be salvaged, what timelines were possible, what they'd have to admit to Northbridge, and what could be proven with my backups. The more I wrote, the more something loosened inside my chest. I wasn't powerless. I never had been. I'd just been too busy surviving to notice. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. This time it was an unknown number. I answered, expecting another assistant. "Mr. Wells?" a woman's voice said. "This is Karen from Northbridge. I'm the VP overseeing the audit. I understand you're no longer with your previous employer, but your name is on almost every technical document we have. I'd like to ask you a few questions, if you're willing." That's when I realized the story had jumped to a different level. This wasn't just my old CEO scrambling. The client was bypassing him entirely. "I'm willing," I said slowly, "but I won't lie for anyone." "I'm not asking you to," she replied. "Off the record, it seems to me someone tried to make you a scapegoat. On the record, I need to know if the system we're about to sign $500 million over is what we were promised." Her words landed with a weight I could feel in my teeth. I didn't know it yet, but the next sentence out of my mouth was going to decide whose career survived the week. I told Karen the truth, not the dramatized version, not the corporate safe version, just the facts. Dates, versions, what existed, what didn't, what could be rebuilt, what couldn't. She listened without interrupting once, and when I finished, she exhaled slowly, the kind of exhale that says someone finally gave her the missing piece of a puzzle she'd been twisting for days. "Thank you, Mr. Wells," she said. "That aligns with what we suspected. I appreciate your candor." She didn't sound angry. She sounded steady, dangerous in her steadiness. Before hanging up, she added, "Just so you're aware, your former CEO insisted yesterday that the missing documentation was your fault. This morning, he implied it was a system issue. I'm sure he'll find a third version by the end of the day. If he contacts you again, document everything." When the call ended, I sat there in my kitchen, staring at the silent phone. Somewhere across the city, Daniel was sweating in a conference room, spinning stories while people like Karen took notes. Notes that didn't favor him. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. It didn't take long for the first signs of panic to reach me. At 2:07 p.m., an email, then two more, then a text. "We need to speak urgently. Northbridge has raised serious concerns. Please respond. This is escalating unnecessarily." Unnecessarily, as if I were the one who fired myself in front of half the company. I didn't reply. I wasn't being dramatic. I simply wasn't going to bail him out before knowing exactly how deep the hole was. So I waited. I reviewed the audit timeline, checked the system snapshots I still had, and laid out what a realistic recovery would require. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning accuracy. Revenge was shaping itself without my help. At 3:16 p.m., my phone lit up with another call, a number I recognized. One of the board members, a man who had barely acknowledged me whenever he visited the office. "Grant, this is Charles Bennett. Do you have a moment?" Not a greeting I expected. "I do," I said. "Good," he replied. "Let me be direct. We are receiving conflicting information from Daniel regarding the integrity of the Northbridge implementation. Your name appears as the primary architect on their technical materials. Are you in a position to consult? For us, not for him?" That distinction? For us. Not the company, not the CEO, the board. I felt something settle inside me, something calm and very certain. "Yes," I said, "I can consult." He blew out a breath, the kind older men make when they know something is finally going right. "Excellent. We'd like you to come in tomorrow morning, off the books for now, just a review." "Understood." After we hung up, I allowed myself one small smile. Not satisfaction, not yet. Just acknowledgement. A door that had slammed shut yesterday was now open again, but this time with a different lock, a different key, and a different hand holding it. By evening, Daniel called again. This time, I picked up. "Grant," he said in a rush. Northbridge is threatening to suspend the deal. The board is asking questions I can't answer without your input. If you want to come back as a consultant, we can negotiate terms. Terms. I almost asked him if he knew the meaning of the word. Before we discuss anything, I said, I want you to say it. Say what? He snapped. The real reason you fired me, I said. You know it. I know it. And the board knows something doesn't add up. Let's start with honesty. A pause, long enough for me to hear him swallow. I made a misjudgment yesterday, he said carefully. I reacted too quickly. That's not honesty, I said. Try again. He didn't try again. Instead, he shifted tone, the way people do when pretending to be calm. Grant, this isn't productive. It wasn't productive when you lied in a room full of people, I said. Now it's just consequences. His voice went tight. If you're planning to sabotage this deal, I'm warning you. Sabotage? I repeated, almost laughing. You fired the only person who could save it. I didn't sabotage anything. I walked out when you pushed me. Silence. Thick. He finally asked, Then what do you want? That was the moment. The access point. The room felt quieter. The air felt colder. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even exhilarated. I was Gilbert. Steady. I want a contract, I said. A real one. My rate, my terms. And before I touch a single file, you will draft a formal statement to the board, acknowledging that yesterday's decision was based on incorrect assumptions. He inhaled sharply. I'm not writing a confession. Then you don't want the deal saved. You're blackmailing me, he said. No, I replied. Blackmail is when someone threatens to reveal a secret. I'm offering you a solution to a problem you created. You can decline. His breathing shifted, shallow, erratic, the sound of a man realizing that the ground beneath him was cracking. This could cost me my job, he said quietly. It already is, I answered. I ended the call. That night I didn't pace. I didn't rehearse speeches. I didn't drown in old anger. I cooked dinner. I read. I slept without dreaming. Because something had clicked in me hours earlier. Something I hadn't recognized until now. That night, I stopped being the hero. The next morning, I arrived at the building at 9 a.m. Security recognized me, hesitated, then buzzed me through after checking the list. I wasn't an employee. I wasn't a guest. I was an appointment. The board's assistant met me in the lobby and led me to a smaller conference room, away from the floor where Daniel usually held meetings. When she closed the door, Charles was already waiting, sleeves rolled up, reading a printed packet. Morning, Grant, he said. Have a seat. We've prepared the documentation. He handed me a folder. Audit requests, internal emails, system discrepancies. All cleanly organized. Someone up the chain was taking this very seriously. I'll need a few hours, I said. Take what you need, he replied. And Grant, thank you for coming in. There was no condescension in his voice, no polite patting, just respect. Something Daniel had never once managed, even when I'd saved his projects. While I worked, voices drifted from the hallway. Tense, low, hurried. I recognized one instantly. Daniel. His cadence was different from usual, clipped and defensive. He's exaggerating, he was saying. It's not as unstable as they think. We just need... The board chair cut him off sharply. We'll decide what we need, Daniel, not you. Their footsteps faded. I returned to the folder, taking notes, mapping solutions, outlining what could be completed before Northbridge's deadline. It wasn't easy, but it was possible, with precision, full access, and no interference from the man who caused the mess. A few hours later, Charles returned. Well, he asked. I can fix it, I said, but not under Daniel. He studied me long enough for me to realize he'd expected that answer. Understood, he said. We'll take it from here. We shook hands. A firm, even handshake. Two adults acknowledging a truth that had been handled enough. As I walked out of the room, I saw Daniel at the end of the hallway, his face pale, collar loose, phone in hand like it was a lifeline. When he saw me, Something flickered across his expression. Anger, fear, desperation, I couldn't tell. He started toward me. "Grant," he said, breathless, "we need to talk." "No," I said. "You need to listen." His jaw tightened. "You think you've won?" "I didn't come here to win," I said. "I came here to clean up your disaster." He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the board chair stepped out of the adjacent conference room. "Daniel," she said, voice cold and formal, "we're ready for you now." He swallowed hard, nodded once, and followed her in. The door closed behind him with a soft, final sound. I didn't know exactly what was happening behind that door, but I knew this. Whatever it wasn't going to save him. The company didn't need a hero. They needed the truth, and they were about to hear it. The door shut behind Daniel, and something in the hallway shifted, like the air finally understood whom it belonged to. I didn't linger. I wasn't there to witness an ending. Endings happen on their own. They don't need an audience. I walked out of the building and let the cold air settle on my face. It felt cleaner than yesterday. Clearer somehow. I wasn't triumphant. I wasn't angry. I was just level, like the ground had stopped moving. By the time I got home, I'd already decided not to wait by the phone. Whatever came next would come on its own schedule. I made lunch, cleaned the counter, opened a window to let the afternoon in. And then, around 4 p.m., my phone buzzed with an email notification. Not from Daniel, from the board. "Grant, thank you for your thorough analysis earlier today. After internal review, the board has determined a leadership restructuring is required, effective immediately. We would like to formally extend an offer for you to lead the technical remediation of the Northbridge project under direct board oversight. Compensation and terms attached." I read it twice, not because I didn't understand, but because of what wasn't there. No apology, no justification, no ceremony, just the practical truth. They were done with him. I scrolled down. The compensation package was more than fair. Higher than I'd ever been paid, higher than he'd ever allowed. Clear timelines, clear authority, direct access to what I needed. Not a favor, not a rescue. A transaction built on respect. Almost on cue, a second notification appeared, this one from Daniel. The subject line was a single word. "Please." I opened it. "Grant, I don't know what you told them, but they're saying I'm being suspended pending further review. I need you to confirm you didn't misrepresent anything. I need you to understand that if the board believes I acted in bad faith, they might terminate me. You know that's not what I intended yesterday. You know that firing you wasn't personal. I was under pressure. I made a mistake. Please, respond." No threats, no arrogance, no corporate polish. Just a man reaching for a ledge he'd already fallen past. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. There was nothing left to clarify. The truth was already in motion, and truth doesn't stop when someone panics. It just continues. I closed the laptop, grabbed my keys, and drove to the office for the evening session with the board. When I arrived, Charles met me in the lobby again. His expression gave away nothing, but the lines in his face looked more relaxed than earlier. "Daniel has been placed on administrative leave," he said as we walked. "The board will vote on his contract in the coming days. For now, we need you to begin stabilizing the Northbridge environment. We've given you full access." Administrative leave, a polite phrase that meant the decision was already made. When we reached the smaller conference room, an IT lead handed me credentials and a laptop already logged into a secure environment. "Everything you asked for is here," she said. "We'll follow your lead." No one had ever said that to me in that building. I spent the next 3 hours reconstructing the pieces everyone else had scrambled. Structured workflows, missing signatures, dependency chains, broken job schedules. I rebuilt the entire compliance lineage from the offline backups I'd kept. Not because I was trying to be a savior, but because it was work I knew, work I could trust, work that didn't lie to me. Around 8 p.m., someone knocked softly and set a takeout container on the table. "Food," they said. in case you forget. That gesture told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't working under someone. I was working with people who understood the stakes and respected the hands holding the tools. By 9:40 p.m., I closed the laptop. The remediation was complete. Clean, verifiable, audit-proof. It would survive scrutiny from anyone. External auditors, regulatory bodies, Northbridge's legal team. It was airtight. I documented everything, exported the evidence chain, and sent it to the board with a simple message. The system is stable. The documentation is complete. You can move forward. I drove home without checking my phone. When I got in, the house was quiet. The kind of quiet people underestimate. The quiet that means no one is waiting to twist your words. No one is waiting to take credit for what you built. No one is standing behind you holding a knife they hope you won't notice. An hour later, an email came in from Karen at Northbridge. Grant, your updates were reviewed by our team. This is exactly the clarity we needed. The board is satisfied. We will proceed with the contract as planned. Thank you. That was it. No praise, no effusive gratitude, just quiet acknowledgement, the kind that means the job was done well. I sat back on the couch, let the silence fill the room, and realized something I hadn't noticed until now. I wasn't relieved. I was settled. The next morning, I got another email from the board. Formal this time. Daniel's contract had been terminated, effective immediately. No reasons listed because none needed to be. The seat he'd built his entire identity around was gone, and the irony was almost too clean to ignore. He lost a $500 million deal because he fired the one person who could save it. He lost his job because he tried to protect himself from a mistake he made. He lost his reputation because he underestimated the man he pushed out the door. Later that afternoon, Charles called. Grant, he said, I wanted to thank you personally for your professionalism. When you're ready, we'd like to discuss a more permanent leadership role. His tone wasn't flattering. It wasn't strategic. It was honest. We'll talk soon, I said, and I meant it. When the call ended, I stepped outside. The air felt lighter than it had in months. I walked to my car without checking behind me. There was nothing back there worth looking at. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt aligned, like the world had finally shifted to match the truth I'd been carrying alone. And then, standing by the driver's door, I realized something simple. Peace isn't dramatic. It's just the absence of stupid. I drove home, no calls, no tension, no knots in my chest. A quiet life fits better when you've earned it. And I had.